Lovely. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Becky. I'm the Chief Exec of the EA, and I'm really pleased to be hosting tonight's session. So, the EA is a learning society and a subject association which was founded in 1906 to promote, support, and defend the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education, from primary and early years through secondary and further education to higher education and beyond. And we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like tonight's are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you again so much to tonight's speakers, Donna and Stephanie and Megan. Our members also make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us if you haven't already. It costs just £53 to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year, and you'll get access to a range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. And I'll pop some info in the chat so you can have a look when you have a few minutes. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to tonight's speakers for our look at children's picture books on difficult and sensitive topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. That was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Welcome everyone to what is our second English Association webinar about books reading, reading for pleasure, reading for habit, reading for enjoyment, and in the primary and early years. This webinar is following our last very successful exploration of the 2023 Picture Book Award winners that was recorded at the UKLA conference in Exeter. Today I'm joined by, I should introduce myself. My name is Megan Dixon, and I'm a teacher, a school leader, and a researcher interested in all things language and literacy related. Today I'm joined by two exceptional colleagues, Donna Lewis, who is head teacher, or I should say principal, of Broken Cross Primary School in Macclesfield, and Stephanie Hilder, a lecturer from the Open University with a specialism in reading for pleasure. Our aim today it comes from a question that was posed to us last webinar around introducing and using books with children. And the idea is to discuss the power of books when it comes to introducing and exploring sensitive and challenging topics with children. We want to consider how books can provide a safe space for children to explore issues in a nuanced way and perhaps offer practical ways. And of course, lots and lots of suggestions of texts that we can use in this way in the classroom. So we've all brought a selection of books with us that we've used with children. But before we dive in, I really want to give our two speakers, Donna and Stephanie, the opportunity to share with us some thoughts and reflections about how they use books and the kind of in this way and the issues and explorations that they feel are important. Donna, I know you use books as a central focus with how you work with children. I wonder if you could start off the conversation a little bit, perhaps by introducing the school that you're head of and the role that books play in perhaps the pastoral work that you do. I know that they have a very central focus.
So I'm Donna Lewis. I'm the head of Broken Cross Primary Academy. We are a single form entry school. We serve an area of high deprivation in an area of quite conspicuous wealth. So we are a hidden gem, I call us. And, you know, sort of along with the community that I serve come lots and lots of difficulties, sort of family life, just I would say a whole range of socio-economic difficulties affect and impact on our families, and therefore that affects our children. We have a nursery that starts with 2-year-olds, so we use books and book talk and picture books all the way through school from our youngest 2-year-olds to our year 6 children, and we find it a really powerful way of approaching issues, thorny issues, that allow us to distance ourselves from the issue slightly, and it distances the child from it, so it takes some of the sting out of it for them. It also means that we can project our feelings onto storybook characters. That's quite a safe way of exploring emotions and exploring feelings. We often sit side by side if we're sharing with an individual child, so we've not got the eye contact and that scrutiny that can make children really uncomfortable if they're discussing or we're discussing topics that are tricky for them. So I think that distancing yourself slightly from the issue with a storybook is a really good way of engaging children into an issue. We find them really accessible for parents as well. So not only do we have a huge range of books that we use in school, but we will lend those to parents as well, because very often it supports them in having difficult conversations with their children.
Thank you. That's wonderful. It does strike me very much that the depersonalization of some of these issues is really powerful, and it also gives you the opportunity to introduce things in a very sensitive way, doesn't it? And kind of draw out from the children how they might be responding and what their challenges might be. Stephanie, I'm really fascinated to understand a little bit about it from your perspective. What can you tell us perhaps about the research perspective, where we're coming from, and the importance of sharing books and stories for children in general?
Okay, thank you. So I'm Stephanie Hilder. I'm a lecturer in Reading for Pleasure with the Open University, and I work with Teresa Kremen and the rest of the team, Kelly, Debbie and Helen. And we work predominantly on programmes with schools across the country who are developing Reading for Pleasure. So our first direction of research would be always, what is it that encourages children to read? Because we know the advantages of reading for pleasure and volitional reading, choosing to read. How is it, as teachers, generally focused on the curriculum, we can support that behavioural choice, if you like? What is it that we can do? And so that's all about obviously having texts that tempt children, having the right texts that are going to be given at the right time or facilitated or supported, but also about opening up choice for children, helping children to be aware of their own preferences in reading and their own reader's identity, sharing ours as teachers and practitioners, and also just really being current and up to date, keeping up with where books and stories are going, because books and stories represent the world that we live in, and they represent the world that we have lived in. And I think as Donna was talking about the world that she's working in there, I think a lot of older books, for example, might not represent that. And so if we want to include as many people as possible in the advantages of reading as we possibly can, then we need to think about, how do we meet them halfway? How do we find the books and stories that give them the words and the language and the themes and the opportunities to talk and think with a sort of distance, as Donna was saying, really. This is not about me. This is about something I know about, and I can extend my thinking this way. So that's where I think we come from at the Open University.
From a personal perspective, and I know that Donna will agree with me, we've used together, Donna and I, in various roles that we've worked together for a long time, and we've used the Open University materials a lot and worked with Teresa to help develop some of them. So I would recommend them to anybody who's thinking about ways of perhaps using books in this way around sensitive topics, but also just that idea of developing reading for enjoyment, for engagement, for habit, those sort of activities that are so important and play such an important and crucial role in our children's development. Thank you. That was fantastic. I'm very struck by that notion of what we are thinking about in terms of the historical perspectives and how we can absolutely build on those as we go through. I wonder if perhaps we can start to share a few of the texts that we've brought that we feel are really helpful and appropriate, and that will spark some of these conversations, some of which aren't very tricky. I know that, speaking for myself, I've brought texts that address issues of bereavement, texts that explore issues of what we might call invisibility or personal distress. Stephanie, I know that you've brought some books around some of those themes as well.
I have. Yeah. Do you want me to start?
Have? Yeah.
Okay. I've got a big stack, so I've really tried to limit myself actually from my big stack to think about what would be useful to share. So may I just choose the first book that I'd like to talk about?
Go for it. Go for
Okay.
it.
You might well know this book. This book, just to before I show you, is by Matt de la Peña, and Christian Robinson is the illustrator, a pairing that are quite celebrated now. They've got 2 or 3 really well-known books under their skin, and they're not easy books, but they are great books. This is the one that I've chosen. Milo Imagines the World. I'd like to pick this one first. And the reason why I've picked this book to share with you is because, as I said a moment ago, one of the things that literature can perhaps uniquely do is allow us to experience something that is outside of our experience safely. We don't have to go through anything in the book ourselves to be able to learn about it, reflect on it, understand different perspectives on it, challenge our thinking on it. That's what books and literature can do. And this is one of those books. It's one of these books personally for me, and I think it's one for anybody who reads it. The first time I read this book, I knew nothing about it, apart from it was recommended to me by somebody who knows a lot about books. A lady from the Norfolk Children's Book Centre recommended it to me, and she said, this is being talked about a lot. So I said, all right, okay, I'll give that a go. I'll have a look at it. And from the front cover, you begin to get an idea of the protagonist, Milo. And Milo goes on a journey, both physically in this book and metaphorically, and I think so does the reader. Physically, the journey that he goes on is on a train, an underground train. We assume, yes, it is. It's a subway. It's actually based in America, but I think it's very relatable, and I don't think that we need to dwell on that aspect. I'm just going to show you the illustrations, because this is the normal illustration style for the main story that's happening. And this more naive, childlike drawing is Milo's thoughts and what Milo's imagining as he goes on this journey. And as he goes on this journey, we learn about him, and we think we learn about the people that he's looking at as well. He thinks he learns about the people that he's looking at, because he looks at people, he's got nothing else to do at the moment. He's feeling anxious. We know that because he describes himself as being like a shook up soda, excited, nervous, all sorts of things are going on in his mind. So he occupies his mind by imagining where this person might go when they get off the train. And at face value, you can just see that as a child's wanderings and using their own experiences to reflect on what we see. But at another level, you can also begin to see, oh, we make assumptions about people based on very little evidence. And Milo comes to realize that. Now, the way that we come to realize that is in part by looking at Milo's assumptions about people as they go about their business. There's a lady here getting married, and she's gone on the train to get married. He sees a little boy who gets on the train, who's wearing a smart suit and has neatly parted hair. And he imagines that this boy is off, therefore, to be collected by coach and horses to go to tea at a castle. He imagines a privileged, advantaged life, I suppose, is the only way of seeing that. But actually, when Milo gets off the train, so does this little boy. And it turns out that both little boys join a queue to see their mother, who is incarcerated, who's in prison. So I didn't see that coming at all. All I saw was a lovely, charming little boy on a journey with his sister, obviously anxious and nervous about something. And you get little clues as you go through. But as Milo realizes that this other boy is going to the same place, he changes his view of that person and of all the other people. And he sort of goes back over all the other people that he's made assumptions about. And I have not yet read this with children, because I've read it with a lot of teachers and I've read it for myself, and I don't yet feel like I've got ready, that I'm ready, because every time I read it, I think more about it. And in a sense, when I was thinking about this webinar, I was wondering whether that's okay. Is that okay with children? Okay, is it okay that we don't know the answers to all of the questions that this might bring up? Are we comfortable with that? Do we feel that we have to structure things? And is that how literature is intended to work? Because I'm not sure it is. I think maybe it's okay to allow the ideas to form more slowly and for the comprehension to come more slowly through the revisits. And that's what's happening with me with Milo. And so I think probably until I'm at the end of that journey, I won't be ready to set the children out on that journey. But when I am, I don't think it will be with the answers ready. It'll be ready to have some conversations. I don't know what your thoughts are.
My immediate thought is I wonder whether having conversations with the children will help your comprehension of it, and to help develop that dialogue that you have with the children, to see it from their perspective and perhaps get insight further. I could see it being an incredibly powerful tool, in lots of respects, actually, to kind of cross sensitivities and ways of working.
Yeah, lots of big ideas can sit behind there around stereotypes, around making assumptions, around people's identities. There's lots of that. And you know, your direction would be led by the children, I think, what's appropriate. But also, I think with any book of this complexity, you also have to be aware of the potential misinterpretations or misinformation that you would then want to think, how do I work with that? How do I bring that round without knowing all the answers and giving all the answers, but being prepared to learn through talk, because that's what empathy is, isn't it? That's that being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and see it from different sides. And I think that's what literature affords.
Yeah, absolutely. Donna.
Sorry, Megan, I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Am I on mute now? No. Okay. Do you have any thoughts or reflections on how you might approach that and using that book in school? Any words of kind of
I think that it led me to think was how that would be received in different year groups. And and this is where picture books are just the most wonderful thing in the world, because they're easily accessible, to most children. But that different age groups would respond and bring really different things to the table with that, Stephanie, and the conversation would be different across year groups, but across the number of times it was revisited as well. And I think it's that power of revisiting. Don't ever think that a book is done because you've read it, you've shared it, and you've had the conversation. It's about revisiting and coming back and allowing time, I think, for things to percolate. We do it as adults, but we don't always give children the time to do that.
And I think actually my reflection on that from what you're saying now is that we're using books in this way in a different way, aren't we? We're not using them to teach reading in inverted commas. We're not using them to have a specific, purposeful tick-off objective to see whether children can think in a particular way or draw certain conclusions. We are very much using this as a way of understanding and gaining kind of greater insight into the world and the world of our peers, of our colleagues, of how other people are in the world. And it probably sits very well in reading for pleasure, although the text might not be considered pleasurable in terms of being happy and jolly and cheering everybody up in that sense, but that kind of deeper engagement and learning sort of strikes really fantastically. Donna, have you got a book?
Megan, that broad interpretation of what we mean by reading for pleasure is really important, because reading for pleasure isn't about reading for fun necessarily, although that's an important part of it. It's reading for escape, it's reading for imagination, it's reading for understanding, it's reading for reflection, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But the pleasure is the wrong word, but it's satisfaction that you can gain from the experience of something that might challenge you, actually. So it's that word pleasure, I think, has connotations that might not tell the full story.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, that's why I kind of almost in a way like to talk about it as reading for habit, or reading for engagement, or reading for a personal agenda. I know, certainly talking to colleagues like Dr. Sarah McGowan, she talks a lot about having reading goals. So it's really important for children to be aware of, like you were saying, what they like to read and why they want to read it, and what their personal goals might be in that context. And it might not be that they want a pleasurable, fun experience. They might want to scare themselves, or to learn about something that they're fascinated in, or to understand more about a certain topic, or whatever. But it's important, isn't it, to kind of expand that definition, but be quite comfortable with it as well. And I really like that aspect about it, all of the conversation around that text being open-ended, being open to interpretations, and that being safe, that's okay as well. It's okay to have different ideas that bring to the story, as long as we are exploring and explaining our ideas and recognizing that they are the ones that are perhaps licensed by the text in front of us. Donna, would you like to share one of yours? I know you've got ones for perhaps the younger children.
Yeah, so I thought about it from an thinking about EYFS and where this all begins. And we have a nursery on site, so we have 2-year-olds on site. So my first kind of selections that I put in are board books, because I think, you know, it's never too early to start. So they don't necessarily, I've got quite a few, they don't necessarily have heavy content, but it starts that idea that books can address issues, that it's not just always about going to the shops with mum or going to the park, that we can actually start to talk about broader issues. So I brought Stick and Stone, and these are board books, which again, I think it's lovely to have board books. And I don't know if you can see Stick and Stone, make a 1 and a 0, and it's just it's sort of just a tale of friendship. One is lonely, one is alone. So lots of wonderful language and illustrations within the book as well. A 0 and a 1, so we get the kind of building a bit of number work in, and it just goes, you know, they're not friends to begin with. They realize being alone isn't any fun. They make friends. Pine cone comes along. Pine cone's a bit spiky, and so he's kind of trying to make them fall out, but sticks up for Stone, and this wonderful friendship comes from this, of sticking up for people. And then it goes on to what I really like about it is it doesn't just talk about them making friends, it talks about the things they then go on to do as friends. So it gives ideas and examples of what friendship might look like, and the kinds of activities you can do together. They get split up in a thunderstorm, and tables are reversed, and Stone goes looking for Stick and finds him and helps him out of a tricky situation. So, as I say, not incredibly heavy in terms of content, but as starting the journey that the children have in school, where we start introducing books that either have issues in them, or not that they have a particular issue that we're looking at, but have representation in them that we're talking about. So this one's another board book. This one's called Love Makes a Family, and love is waking up bright and early, but it's just about the representation with it. Love is knowing where everything is. Love is finding the biggest puddles. Love is playing on the weekend. But within all of it, we have different families represented. And so the hope with these is that all of those representations become normalized. And I don't need a book when they're higher up school to talk about a particular issue, because the issue hopefully won't have arisen. They've had representation from the very youngest age. We've kind of introduced it and explored it as they are growing, rather than them coming to it later on.
Yeah, it strikes me that you're by using books like this and introducing those kind of topics, you're perhaps preempting difficulties, but also, as Stephanie was saying, giving voice to an ability to talk about these things, because perhaps children might look at that and articulate and notice difference and suggest that. And that, again, is a safe space in which to gently explore some of these ideas with the children, and allow them the safety and the security to know that it's okay to ask, but also to start understanding perhaps the nuances behind them.
Megan, you've just gone off microphone again. Is that my cue to talk?
There you go.
Okay, just picking up and absolutely agreeing with you, Donna, that just having those books that represent lots of different kinds of people doing stuff that people do in stories right from the beginning is so important, because we pick up messages without those messages necessarily being conscious ones, don't we? And a very prevalent message up until the great work of the Reflecting Realities report and the publishers who jumped helpfully on that was that, you know, all the books that we saw were fairly monocultural in schools, which is another reason why we have to keep up to date, why we've got to be seeing what's out there and what's published more recently, because if we go back before even 2016, we're probably going to find maybe 4% of books with some character that isn't Caucasian white. So that's not the reality of the world, is it? And who would want to be living in that world? We need all of our children to see themselves, windows and doors, windows and mirrors. Everybody's very familiar with that phrase, I know. Can I share another book?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a different version of diversity in a way. This, well, sort of, maybe this is how I see it. We're talking about seeing our own lives and seeing other people's lives. And I don't know if you know this book by Joanne Schwartz and Sydney Smith. I think it did win an award. I can't remember which one. And this story, although it's set in the 1950s, it needn't be. Again, it's another case of we don't necessarily need to draw attention to that. But we start with a double-page spread of a house. So there's lots of conversation there about what does this house remind us of? What is it like? Is it like our house? What does it tell us, if anything, about the people in it? And like every good picture book, the story is being told down one narrative line with the pictures, and there's additional through the words. They're not necessarily doing the same thing at the same time. So from my sea, I can see the sea. From my house, I can see the sea. It goes like this: house, road, grassy cliff, sea. And town spreads out this way and that. And you see a sunny seaside house location, and you see the city and the town. And you also see Dad, we think, leaving the house, walking in the direction of the big town, and all the other men of the area heading in that direction as well. And then you see where they're going, and they're all off to work down the mine. And the story is told so simply. I mean, the pictures themselves are, they're deceptive. They look simple because it's all bold lines. But the story that is told is one of repetition, of regularity, of expectation. But there's also great contrast between it's all told from the boy's point of view, from the sunny days that the boy is seeing and where his mind is. And his mind is very often with his dad, who is under the sea at the coalface. Very different, utter contrast there. But what I think is touching about this book and interesting for the conversations it could open is that it's about permanence, and it's about inevitability, because the little boy is talking all the way through about this is his dad's life. At some point, this is going to be his life. He's going to go down the mine, and it was his dad's life. And I think that conversation about what control we have over our futures, what opportunities we believe we have, and what opportunities we might have that we might not believe that we have. And that's not to say that this is a negative even. There's a pride in that continuity and that service as well. So a deceptively simple book, which I thought might bring us back to England, but not all parts of England. So there are communities who will very much feel the pit lifestyle, still very much part of who they are and their identity. And this could open up some conversations, useful ones, I hope.
Yes, it sounds wonderful. I know that book. I have actually used it with children, and it is remarkable in what they observe, particularly from the pictures, and what they take from it. And that kind of idea, I'm very taken with the idea that you were talking about that difference between permanence and the kind of ever-evolving and changing world that's sometimes happening quite fast. And we've had a period where things were not under control, where perhaps children have felt very much put upon and very much out of control. Things are happening around them at a great pace that they're not necessarily aware of. So some of those issues that come through, I think, will be really fascinating to explore with them a little bit further. You've given me some more ideas for the next time I use that book with children. Thank you. I'm going to pick up on one and share one of the books that I've brought with me,
Yes.
if that's okay, because I think it follows both of the themes that you've both picked up on. It's by Tom Percival, who's, becoming very familiar as a rather wonderful author and illustrator for us. And it's called Invisible, The Invisible. And what I love about this book is that it actually gets to the heart of what perhaps maybe a lot of children feel but can't necessarily articulate for themselves. So the main character is this lovely little girl, and she lives with her family in a very nice house, and she, to all intents and purposes, has what's a lovely, what she calls a beautiful life, and she's always noticing beautiful things around her because of that. But for whatever reason, her family suddenly finds itself in a position where things are getting really tough. They can't turn the heating on, they can't afford things, and life becomes a little bit less beautiful. So she's trying not to worry about stuff. And then the family has to move, and she has to move from her house that she thinks is glorious and wonderful, and they move to another part of the city. And when she gets there, she notices that the things around her possibly reflect her mood, and nothing is beautiful anymore, and she can't seem to cheer herself up. And it's become very cold and snowy and very sad and lonely. And as she walks around this place, this part of the town, she notices that she seems to be invisible, that people don't notice her anymore. They don't seem to see her. They don't smile at her when she walks past. They don't engage with her. And she's actually believes that she's fading away. And as she fades away to become what she considers completely invisible, she notices that there's a whole world of other invisible people around with her as well. People who've perhaps fallen on hard times as well. An old lady who's very lonely, a gentleman who's sleeping on a park bench, a boy who's got a broken bicycle that has just come from someone else. And she wants to try and help this. So I'm not going to tell you what she does. I'm going to leave you to buy the book and find out. But it's a really rather lovely story, again, about possibility and agency, and knowing that things can get better and that you can personally make a difference in terms of perhaps your attitude, but bringing people around. It's about collective agency in that respect. And again, a very open book that I think a lot of children will be able to relate to, particularly in these kind of straitened circumstances that we're in, and perhaps give them a freedom and a voice to articulate some of their concerns and worries, and empathize, and to be able to see themselves in the shoes of this character. Donna, did you want to move on and share some of your other books with us?
Can I if I build on what you've just been talking about, that idea of being, sort of almost invisible, or the worries that children have, I've selected loads of books. You can't help it once you're asked to. So this is wonderful. This is called Barbara Throws a Wobbler, which I just love for the title, and I love the fact she's called Barbara as well. And again, we're talking about nursery foundation stage. It's about learning how to sort of banish bad moods. But then the one that sits alongside it is Ruby's Worry. And I've got to post it on it, because to me, this is kind of where we would start to introduce the idea of mental health and mental well-being. So again, from a very early age, the idea of talking about concerns, talking about worries, how, Ruby loves being Ruby. She loves to swing up high. She loves exploring wild and faraway places. She was perfectly happy until one day she discovered a worry. It wasn't a very big worry, but I'm sure, as you can imagine, this worry grows. And it makes me very much think about, with those of you who know Black Dog by Pinfold, that I would use with older children in school. But this would be the way of introducing the idea of a worry, and a hidden, invisible worry that other people can't see. And that we start talking about those things at the very youngest age, so children do learn to be open and honest about their feelings, but also to understand that it is invisible, and that their friends around them might be feeling a certain way, but they're not showing it. So it's just developing that empathy, but also hopefully supporting them to acknowledge from the very youngest children, you worry about things, and it's okay to worry. It's perfectly normal. It's how we manage that worry. And then maybe if we can support children to manage their worries lower down school, we end up not needing a book like Black Dog. when they're
Yeah.
higher up school and they're older.
That brings to mind another book that I don't have with me, but I can't remember the author, but it's called The Colour Thief, and it's about a boy who's wrestling with the challenges that he has a parent with a serious depressive illness as well, where all the colour has been removed from their lives. So he's not worrying himself about his worry; he's worrying about his parents' worries, and how that aspect of mental health and how that can show itself within a family, because it can be extremely concerning to children, and again, this gives us a little bit of an intro into being able, perhaps on a one-to-one basis, yes, sitting alongside to begin to have those kind of conversations. I've got another book as well. Now I can't stop, sorry, which is in the PowerPoint. So I should say that we have collected a group of resources, because we've got so many book recommendations that we can't possibly talk about them all now, that we will share with you. In this book, it's called All Owls Have Anxiety, and it is anxiety through the faces and pictures of owls, and it is absolutely glorious. It's I've spent many hours with older children in Key Stage 1 exploring the pictures of owls, exploring the way that these things are articulated, and helping children kind of recognize some of those feelings that are exhibited through the owls' faces within themselves as well. So being able to recognize the symptoms of anxiety in itself and take it further. Okay, I think in the last 5 minutes, I wonder if we could oh, brilliant. Becky's put those links in the chat for us. Thank you. In the last 5 minutes, I wonder if we could just move the conversation on a little bit to, perhaps some of the sort of rules of thumb about using texts like this with children. Because I'm very aware as well that the last conversation, the last webinar, the question was around perhaps teachers having some anxiety in broaching some of these subjects, perhaps because they felt that it would not be considered acceptable by parents or families or some of the other communities. I wonder, Donna, could you start us off with that kind of some thinking around that? How do you approach this with your staff?
I think one of the things we realised quite early on is that some staff were really uncomfortable with doing this, and some staff manage the situation as if they were speaking with their own children. That sounds wonderful, but as parents, we all share different amounts of information with our children when they ask questions. And as educators, it's not our job to do that. We need to be very, very careful. So part of it for us was almost developing a really soft script for staff, where there's lots of language around. Some people think, or not everybody, not everybody believes that, but some people believe this. So just giving them some sort of vocabulary and ways of answering tricky questions, and also saying to them, I'm not going to answer that question right now, sweetheart, but we can have a talk later. Or, oh, that might be something we can talk with mum or dad. We can talk with grown-ups at home about that. So just empowering them as well to say, it's okay to say, we're not going to talk about that right now, but I am going to come back to it. I'm not going to leave you hanging. As far as parents have been concerned, we're very open in school about what we do. We're a no outsiders school, for those of you who know what No Outsiders is as an organisation. So we have a whole curriculum that's built around books. The topics can be quite challenging. That goes from reception right the way through to year 6. We're open and honest with parents. If you come and have a look around my school, you will see the signs that say quite clearly what it is that we do in school. I am a big believer in, if you don't like the messaging on my walls, you probably won't like some of the content that we're going to deliver to your children. And that's okay. So I'm upfront about what we do, and parents make a choice based on that. I really don't think I've lost any. I think if you're open and honest, I think parents are frightened by what they read in the newspapers and hear in the news, which doesn't reflect any school I've ever been in or worked in, if I'm being honest with you. So once you address the issue head on, which I tend to do with most things, Megan will tell you this, they kind of go, oh no, that makes sense, that's fine.
Brilliant, thank you. I mean, I knew you'd have some pearls of wisdom and some wise words in that respect. Absolutely. So I mean, I think, yeah, if in doubt, and the question is to ask, isn't it? And to talk to your colleagues around you about how maybe they would broach the situation, and like you say, the soft script that they might use. I wonder, Stephanie, have you got some pearls of wisdom for us?
Well, I don't know if they're pearls of wisdom. They're probably saying much the same thing, really. I think there's a few things. I think being comfortable with dialogue and conversation that you're not controlling, you're participating in. I think that's one thing. I think perhaps with the scrutiny that we're all under, we have, as a profession, maybe erred on the side of structure and certainty. And I think discussion around literature and difficult issues needs to be open and responsive. So being comfortable with that. I think reading around your book, if your book is going to be controversial, I know that Milo Imagines the World is controversial in some places. I know it's been banned in some places in America. So I would take the trouble to find out why, what are the sensitivities with it. And there is, I will just give it a plug, it's nothing to do with me, but there is a very good teacher's guide published by Penguin that helps to understand that background. So I would do that. I would also think about what I know of my class context and my community context to decide whether this book needs any mediation or it needs to be with some groups, or whether it needs to be bought individually to pupils, or how do I need to do that, and what am I doing it for? Because I think literature needs to be enabling. These conversations need to be supportive and enabling. We're not trying to stir up difficulties for the sake of controversy. We're trying to navigate the world that we live in. So I think approaching everything with that integrity and authenticity probably helps somewhat. And remembering that reading for pleasure is a social activity. It's very much about relationships. So build those relationships around your book and with your parents. As you are saying, Donna, we're not running away from these conversations. We'll have them with anybody who wants to have those conversations with us. I think that honest relational approach supports reading for pleasure and supports communities.
Fantastic, thank you. So I just want to say thank you, Donna and Stephanie. It's been fantastic. I've had such a great time talking about these sorts of things with you, as I knew I would. It's been an absolute privilege. I guess my final thought and reflection to colleagues who have joined us is that this is the second webinar, and it appears that we might be beginning a bit of a series. So if you have a topic or an area around picture books, reading for pleasure, those sorts of things that you'd like us to explore in more detail, or you would like to contribute as well, please do let us know. I'm going to hand back to Becky now.
I just get to say thank you again to everybody for coming along, and thank you to our speakers. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. So thank you very much, and have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming, people.
Well, I think